Well, 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 what have we here? It turns out, after all, that the Chechen bombers, Dzhokhar, actually, this is the second one, we know for sure, had no firearm on him. He wasn't armed. Now, I had talked about this before this thermal imaging video even came out. I wish that was linked right now. But really, now it's a moot point to even show you. I had actually planned to make a video showing you that video, which you can find very easily. There's a screen cap of it there to the left. And you can see from the incoming heat signatures that, or from the heat signatures that the incoming fire is the only gunfire that's occurring in and around that boat. There's no originating fire coming from the boat. You see a bomb thrown in the boat, like I don't know if it's a flashbang or what. You see all sorts of little heat signatures like that. You can see the boat getting chewed up by the numerous rounds that the officers were firing, but you don't see any heat signature coming from a firearm of this individual. So, why did the police say that they got in a shootout? If you remember my video, what was that? I guess Saturday morning or whenever that was. I said, just be skeptical of this because they're talking about this shootout and there's no evidence of it. They're not showing you any evidence of a shootout. What they're doing is they're trying to heroify themselves. The cops, they're trying to heroify themselves. We got in this big shootout. It was Wild Wild West times. This shootout with this terrorist. Really, it's no different than what happened in L.A. And then up in Big Bear with these trigger-happy cops. But especially in L.A., they were just unloading on anybody who did or didn't fit the description. Now, I'm certainly not saying that this individual wasn't involved in the bombing. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that when you have a suspect, you don't just unload on him when he's basically passed out on the verge of death. You don't just unload because it's a boner kill to go on this big manhunt and then not get to shoot your weapon. That's not really how it works. Well, I find all of this ironic because Miss Maddow. Let me back up here. There we got this right here. Terror watch list.
Same deal all along the southernmost border of New Hampshire. Fireworks stores, lots of them.
Fireworks. That's her talking about her
including
harebrained
in the
theory.
town of Seabrook.
Her harebrained theory of how illegal guns are getting into cities like Chicago. She seems to think that people are buying them across state lines legally, unaware of the federal prohibition of doing so. So, once again, they're grasping at straws, and they haven't really done their homework, but that never stops them. Guns in the terror watch list. Now, this ties in, because Miss Maddow, she blogged this yesterday, and she was outraged that you could be on the federal terrorist watch list and still buy a gun. Well, that sounds awful bad, doesn't it? Well, let me give you some insight. During the Bush administration, I was on the federal terror watch list. Why? For opposing the Bush regime's wars on the Iraqi people and the Afghani people. That isn't apparently something that she considered, that people could be on the terror watch list as an act of political repression and punishment for activist activities, for organizing protests, for organizing dissent, for writing publications, for all sorts of things like that. Things like that will and do and have gotten people on the terror watch list, the no-fly list. I found out in the middle of a trip, on my return trip to L.A., that I was on the no-fly list. Now, I got myself off of that no-fly list by submitting to continued, just over and over, questioning by the FBI. The individual I dealt with was very professional. I'm not going to say anything bad about that main agent that I dealt with. He was somewhat understanding. I I would interpret from things that he said that this was, he had been sent on wild goose chases before. He didn't say that, but in my case, it most certainly was a wild goose chase. There were no charges. I was taken off the list. But is Rachel Maddow seriously saying that I should be denied the right to self-defense, which the Supreme Court has interpreted the Second Amendment as an individual right of, the individual right of self-defense? Living in bad neighborhoods that I've lived in, I should have no right to defend myself and my family against armed attackers because the Bush administration, the Bush regime, had decided to punish me for political activism? That doesn't sound very liberal at all. It's certainly not what liberal has ever meant to me or to anyone I know in the activist communities, in the anti-war communities. But MSNBC has apparently increasingly become the media arm of the White House. There's virtually no critical thinking, no challenging of White House positions. And when the White House wants to push an agenda, MSNBC seems to, carry that torch for them. And every day, day in and day out, that becomes the issue of primary focus for the journalists of MSNBC. Well, once again, this is just something that Ms. Maddow has not considered. She apparently thinks if someone's on a terror watch list, it means that we don't have to grant them due process, much like Dianne Feinstein quickly came out and said after these Chechen suspects were identified, that she supported the use of drone assassination against them, that we should have just done that, no due process. Isn't that nice? Of course, Senator Lindsey Graham, who she cites here, also said that. So this is a bipartisan effort to strip people of due process and constitutional rights, which are human rights, enshrined in the Constitution, enshrined in the Bill of Rights, not granted by them, but enshrined because these are natural rights. And anybody who understands the milieu of political philosophy out of which the Constitution grew understands that that's really what's being discussed. These are inherent and natural rights which the state has to recognize as their part of a social contract theory.